things that are happening in Congress, inflation, the supply chain, employment. So let's get right to it. We're going to cover a lot of things today. We're going to catch up to date on where we are with the vaccination, inflation, tax changes, housing update. I put this on hold for a little while, but I do have some updated information for today. Stock market and the Econ Map. All right, vaccine tracker. Well, we are up to 217 million first doses right now. And unfortunately, as you can see with the little tracker, it's not quite clicking up at the speed that we would hope it would be. The positive news is we have some good news out of Moderna, and J&J have asked for the booster shot from the FDA to be approved. We've also now know that Merck has a pill that would be much easier to dispense. So we're on the right track. We're just not going at the speed I think that anyone would like. Unemployment, here's some interesting information. We are now, last week, now this might be an anomaly, but I don't think so. We are now at the lowest new claims we have been since a year and a half ago. What's the reason? Well, as I said earlier, when that free money runs out, people will have to find a way to go back to work. And, I'm sorry if they can't make $80,000 a year working at the front desk or the front counter at Chipotle, but this is reality. I mean, people are going to go back to work. Because a lot of this stimulus has run out, and it's interesting, a lot of this child care tax credits that were anticipated, the IRS is far behind in what they need to do. They've got a lot on their hands. They're understaffed. And I think that a lot of people didn't go back to work because they thought, hey, I could sit home if I've got 3 kids. I'm going to make $1,000 a month, $900 a month tax-free. That's equivalent to $18,000 to $20,000 a year. Maybe if I'm married, my spouse can go to work and et cetera, et cetera. But that's not happening, and they're running out of money. So people are going back to work. This is a good thing. I'm going to go back to what I originally said, that the original $400,000 benchmark that Biden's administration promised, that no one under $400,000 would pay more in income tax. They're breaking their promises. I said it was going to happen. Listen, I don't care if you're Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're independent. I don't care if you're a green alien. The bottom line is all politicians lie. Every single one of them. It doesn't matter. They will say what they will say to get in office, and the minute that they are in office, it all changes because they're elected now. What do they have to lose, right? And especially if they're not looking for a second term. So the bottom line is this is going to be a draconian environment. It's going to go back to like it was in the 70s and 80s. They've already shown us right out of the gate what they're looking to do to increase taxes. And that will have an effect on every single person. It doesn't matter whether you're making $50,000 or $60,000. But, they've actually said those people that are making $50,000 to $80,000 a year will actually have the highest tax increase. And it doesn't change with capital gains tax. So even if you have investments, it depends on where you live. Now, the corporate income tax and the capital gains tax, now we will be the third highest taxed country in the world. Talk about taking away some incentive for people to move to the U.S. or to stay in the U.S. There it is. But inflation, I get a lot of people that are talking to me about worried about inflation. I'm really not. I am not worried about inflation at all. You watch the headlines and they'll talk about 7-year high on gasoline. Let's look at this. A year and a half ago, it was the 10-year low. This is the way the world works, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. But as far as hyperinflation goes, no, we are not going to 1930s Germany, or we're not going to the 1980s Brazil. The bottom line is that this is a function, not of our monetary policy. And there's the difference. People will try to fear-monger you into believing that you should leave the country with your money because the U.S. is falling apart. Listen, bottom line is, economically, while I'm not happy with these tax policies, there's no other country I would move my money to. Absolutely not. I mean, you look at Germany, they tax you based upon net worth. You look at Sweden and everybody says, oh, well, the healthcare system is fantastic in Sweden. Does anybody understand why? Well, number one is they're a lot healthier than we are. They can afford a healthcare system. But would you want to move to a country that has 75% taxation? No, because then you're paying for all those unhealthy people. And you're paying for all the college people that want to go to college. It doesn't mean that, listen, if you've watched anything that I've done in the past 20, 30, 40 years, giving away free stuff takes away incentive. we need that incentive, because I've seen it before when I was a trustee, and I'd have to stroke checks to colleges. I'll tell you about one great example. I had a 45-year-old beneficiary that I was the trustee of. Every year, he would join up and matriculate into college. He'd come in, show me that he was matriculated in college, and I'd have to write him a very large 6-figure check. He'd then drop out of school. He'd do it every single year. Why? Because the trust said as long as he was matriculated in school, in college, then he would be entitled to a distribution from the trust. Here's a 45-year-old guy that's been playing that game for 25 years, right? So again, inflation in our country is not something to worry about. We live in a country where the monetary policy is as solid as any other country, if not better than any other country, but we have a short-term problem, and it is a short-term problem, because I anticipate somewhere between the second and the third quarter of next year, it'll start to dip in the first quarter of next year, and then in the second to third quarter of next year, I see a repair of this. We see it already. What I built out in my Econ Map, which you're going to see, inflation will spike. People will not want to go back to work until the incentive is taken away, or until they're incentivized to go back to work. And we'll see this change over time, but do not get worried about inflation. I'm not worried about it. Housing, here's a big change, right? Right now, and let me make a little correction there. It says 45 million, so it looks like there's a little typo there. It's 45,000 right now. There's in just the last 30 days. Now remember, the foreclosure forbearance was in place until September. And I said you wait until after September, because that's when it takes a little time for these mortgage companies to come out and send out mortgage foreclosure notices and give final notice and start the foreclosure proceeding. It doesn't happen overnight. So again, right now, make that typo error there. There's 45,000 new mortgages in 30 days. Now that is a 68% increase from the same time last year. Right now, there are still 1.6 million mortgages in foreclosure process. There's no additional extensions. So, there was a couple extensions where the government said, okay, we'll keep extending forbearance. And you know what a lot of people did? They took that money that they would have given to the mortgage company and they went out and spent it. Now, a lot in the real estate industry have said, well, I wouldn't worry about a big real estate crash like it happened in the Depression, because there's this giant gap between what people owe and the value. I would agree with that, because right now there's a supply chain shortage. There's labor shortage and there's material shortage, which then puts a shortage into housing. However, when you flood the market with a giant number of foreclosures and people can start buying that real estate for a much lesser price, the gap between the net equity, or the fair market value, and what somebody owes on something will come down, because the prices will come down. And you will start to see some acceleration. This will be more like compound interest. In the first 6 months, we're not going to see a big effect on the housing market. But when all those supply starts to hit and people start to have to reduce prices in order to sell, and at the same time, you have a correction in the supply, right? Because look what happens. When people are threatened with a mortgage foreclosure, and you have 1.6 million people that are saying they can't pay their mortgage, but a lot of those people, they're just refusing to go to work. They're under this new belief that, life and balance is more important than working and actually paying your mortgage. So they're not working. But what will happen is when those houses foreclose, there's going to be a percentage of those people that will say, God, I got to get back to work, and maybe I'll make an arrangement with my bank. So not all of those 1.6 million mortgages will foreclose, but my estimate is that 30% of the estimated 1.6 million mortgages will foreclose, and that is going to push a huge number of pieces of real estate back into the market. And what that will also do, think through this, if people now are forced to go back to work to pay their mortgage, now you don't have a labor shortage, right? And now you also have a material continuity with the supply chain, because a big reason for the supply chain disruption right now is labor shortage. People don't want to go to work to manufacture things, to ship things, to distribute things, to sell things. And so this will all mend itself. So again, I keep emphasizing, if you are going to be buying real estate, wait it out. It's going to have a big change very soon. Let's look at the S&P 500. If we look right now, and we're about 10 months into the year, we're up 20% for the year, which is, effectively maybe 25% for the year. So we're still cranking pretty good. It's funny because last 2-3 weeks in September, people, when the market dropped, everybody's, oh my God, the market's crashing. If you remember what I said last week, I pulled a couple articles off the internet of these fear-mongering, promoting people that want to sell you informational products or sell you to go to a conference because they're going to tell you that the market is in its biggest, it's going to crash. And I saved the articles. What I'm going to do is in November, I'm going to come back on. I'm going to show you those articles and show you how ridiculous it is to watch that stuff because it has no underpinning, has no factual or foundational numbers calculated behind it. It's all, oh my God, the market is at a high. It's going to drop. Everybody's going to go bankrupt. So let's go to this seminar. We're going to charge a couple grand to go to the seminar. And then we're going to sell you a whole bunch, a couple $1,000 per piece, informational pieces, so that you can learn to do something that you've never done before, which you will never do in the future. But you've given a big portion of your money to them. So the biggest way to lose money is to believe and buy into this kind of stuff. So as you can see here, the market is back, and I don't have any qualms about stating my belief and opinion that this market still has another 10 to 15% to go. And that is based upon that $5.3 trillion that's in cash sitting on the sidelines waiting to get spent. Now, the good news is on the supply chain, maybe you've been reading this, I've been talking about how the LA port, and it's not just the LA port, it's a lot of the ports, but the LA port is one of the biggest ports in the US, and it's backed up. There's now over 30,000, it was 24,000 not too long ago, but over 30,000 container cars or container shipping units, I don't know what they say those, sitting on ships. They don't even have the room to stick them in the port. And that's because of a labor shortage. That's because the port was only open during normal business hours. So the White House, hey, I'm going to give credit where credit's due. They now are going to open that port 24/7 to start getting distribution out because this administration is scared to death that if they don't do that and we get to the Christmas season and we have this kind of labor and material and product shortage, it'll crush their political future, right? So they're doing some things that are good. One of the other good things is if we looked, there's been 168,000 people that have come over the border. Now that floods the market, right? Because they're going to go out and they're going to get illegal jobs, and I know it still happens, and they're going to get illegal jobs at very, very low pay. And the bad thing is they're not going to pay taxes. They're not going to put into the Social Security system. But under this new system, they're still entitled to free health care or health care through emergency rooms and poverty type of situations. And that's really sad. But as of yesterday, the White House now did declare that they're going to go back to stay in Mexico policy. We have to have some containment at the borders because that will disrupt our labor balance with products and distribution and supply chain. So the good news is I think we're still on a really good track. I think the White House has gotten kicked in their teeth enough, and they're actually starting to make some good decisions. Now, I'm not in agreement with any political party with all the decisions that they make, but I'm starting to see some ground as far as it is concerned with economics. All right, let's talk about the Econ Map. And I'm still on version 7. I have not changed version 7, and I'm still giving that circle of opportunity for real estate to happen right towards the end of the first quarter, going into the second and third quarter of next year. I don't know about you, but I'm revving up. I'm looking for some stuff. I'm trying to place out, where I might place the next piece of real estate because I think that there's going to be some real buying opportunities. And I think that will open up again towards the middle. I think the prime time is going to be somewhere around the middle of next year, June, July, August, somewhere around there. Now, the only offset to that, and I don't think it's a big offset, is this vaccination mandate with some of these states. Now, all that's going to do, it's going to push a percentage. I don't think it's a big percentage. We're looking at all of the resignations of people in California and Chicago and New York where they're mandating these kinds of vaccinations. And those people are basically saying, the heck with it. I'm just going to resign. I'll move to Texas. I'll move to Florida. I'll move to wherever they don't have these kind of mandates. That's not going to be a big percentage. I mean, if you take a look at across the board what some of the statistics are saying, it's 1.5 to 2.5% of that workforce. But that's dispersed. It doesn't also mean that they're going to move. It just means that they're going to resign. So again, I don't think that that's going to have a big push. It may have a trend towards some of those better states where they don't have those mandates. And we've talked about this before. Some of the biggest increases in real estate have been in Texas, Nevada, Florida, where they don't have the income tax and they have much more relaxed living with this whole virus. All right, it's not going to change much. I am not changing any of my estimates on taxation or the stock market. I think the stock market is going to just continue on gangbusters probably until the end of the first quarter, beginning into the second quarter of next year. But remember, taxes are going to have an impact, not necessarily on the overall stock market, but it will on certain areas. Remember what I talked about last week is the velocity of money. That means that when the government taxes money, they spend it. They just make a decision on where they're going to spend it. The money doesn't get burned up. This mentality, people go, well, they're going to take my money. Well, this is physics, right? Matter does not just dissipate. Matter changes its composition. It changes from a fluid to a gas, a solid, and it's no different with money. People have to understand that. That's what we term as velocity of money. So when the government increases your taxes, it doesn't mean that the money disappears. It just gets dissipated into a different form, right? It's just like physics. So if they tax you and then they put more into defense, well, the people at Boeing and Lockheed, et cetera, they're going to make more money. They're going to go out and spend more money. And then they're going to give more money to their vendors. Their vendors will make more money and spend money. So you just have to look at, it's not an elimination of the money. It's a realignment of where the money is actually going. Government's basically saying, we want to decide where to spend your money because you're not smart enough to spend it. So we'll decide where to spend it. Okay. So we're going to get back to the Roaring 20s playbook. We're still not into step 4 here. If you look at history, because that's the best way that we can follow human nature, we are basically on a pathway of repeating what happened in the 1918-1919 pandemic. There's some differences, as I've talked about before, whereas we don't have, they didn't have Social Security, they didn't have welfare, Section 8, food stamps, unemployment, all these things that we have, the SEC, the SIPC, FDIC, none of those things were around back then. So we have that going for us now. However, we're not to the point where we're spending. Why? There's a supply chain break. We can't get a lot of products. You can't get a car. You can't get computers. Computer chip shortage, right? So we're not through that yet. But as you follow these webinars that I'm doing or these broadcasts, you're going to see where I change that Econ Map because I'm studying and I'm following what the per capita spend versus debt per capita is. And that's when we're going to start to see a shift. And then that's when we start to play a little different ball game. Okay? All right, actions to take right now. Again, I'm going to just restate, there's not much I haven't that I've changed in the last probably 3 months, but not everybody listens to this. So number 1, considering getting ready for real estate. Doesn't mean you bank cash. God, that's one of the worst things you could ever do. I would put it into investments and have a loan against those investments, or I would have a profit sharing plan or pension plan so I can borrow against my retirement plan. Remember, if you have an IRA, you may not borrow against an IRA, but you do have the legal right to set up an LLC and then set up a pension plan and then move your IRA to the pension plan. Now you can borrow against the pension plan. Whole different ball game. You can borrow against life insurance. You can borrow against a stock portfolio. You can borrow against your real estate. Now, if you're going to borrow against your real estate, I would suggest you do that right now because interest rates are still low. You can use a reverse mortgage, which I am an absolute fan of. We don't sell them. I'm not a mortgage broker. I make no referral fees. There's no compensation in it for me. But the bottom line is when you look at the numbers, it's a no-brainer if you want to buy real estate if you're over 62 years old. Okay, so hey, before we wrap up today, for those of you that are just joining us now, we set up a sister site and a sister YouTube page. It's called Wiser Retire. It's wiserretire.com. And if you have children or grandchildren, or let's say you don't have a net worth of greater than $500,000. You want to utilize Wiser Retire. Why? It really is designed for those people that are in the accumulation stage. And then when you get to the distribution stage, then you flip over to the H&H Retirement brand because it's a whole different mentality, a whole different structure. And in either case, what I would suggest you do is if you're in the distribution phase and you're not a subscriber on the YouTube page, just type into your Google, just say, hey, Google, H&H Retirement on YouTube. You're going to get this page that you see in front of you right here. And all you have to do is click on that little red button up in the top right, and you'll get notified of all of the upcoming videos or educational stuff that I do. And if you've got children, grandchildren, etc., hey, give them the Wiser Retire page that they can subscribe to. And without further ado, we're going to let you get to your weekend. Have a great weekend. This is Ken Himmler signing off. Oh, one other thing. If you want any questions answered, 844-702-1040. Hey, have a great weekend.